Hello everyone, I am Shruti Vijayargi from BISP Solution. There's another video for Microsoft Excel financial functions, and in this video I am going to explain you the yield category of financial functions. So yield functions is the annual rate of return on an investment and which is usually expressed as a percentage. In the yield category, there are 7 functions. The first one is the yield, then yield disk, then yield mate, then odd F yield, then odd L yield, then T-bill EO, then T-bill yield. In this video, I am going to explain you the first 3 functions of yield category. The first function is the yield, and this function is used for calculating the yield of a security that pays periodic interest. One straightforward way to calculate the value of a bond is to estimate the bond's yield given the investment's conditions. Those include the price, the coupon rate, and time to maturity. In Excel, you can calculate a bond's yield, perhaps not surprisingly, by using the yield function. The yield function has 7 arguments, and those are the settlement date, which is the date that you gain control of the security, then the maturity date, which is the date that the investment ends and all money is payable to you. Then there is a percent coupon argument, and that argument gives you the interest rate representing the amount of money that you will receive for each of your coupon payments. Next is the price, and this is the price per $100 that you have to pay to gain the security. And then you have the redemption value, which is the base value that you get in return for your $100 investment. Your redemption value is almost always $100, and the reason that it is because you are receiving coupon interest and the bonds creators basically don't want to pay you twice. And next we have frequency, and that is the number of coupon payments per year. It can be 1, which is annual, 2, which is semi-annual, and 4, which is quarterly. And then finally we have the basis, and basis is how you count the number of days in a month and in a year. The value 0 assumes a 30-day month and a 360-day year. If the value were 1, then we would be counting actual days, so a 360-day year depending upon when it fell, and also 28 or 29 days in fells depend upon a leap year versus non-leap year. So with all this information in place, we can calculate the yield of this investment. So let's look at the example. I have an example of yield function. This is the settlement date, then maturity date, percent coupon rate, price, redemption value, frequency here is 2, which represents semi-annual, and the base is 0, which is 30 by 360 basis. So to calculate the yield for this data, you just select the cell, type an equal sign, select the function yield, and now I can start filling in the cell references for the arguments. First one is the settlement date and comma, maturity date, comma, rate, comma, price, comma, redemption value, comma, frequency, comma, and basis. And then write parenthesis. Now I will just make sure that all my references looks good, and they do, and I will press enter. When I do, I see the yield of this bond is 6.5%. The yield function provides a simplified look at bonds. The function assumes the bond interest rate stays constant, which almost never happens, that you reinvest your bond interest and there are no delays in getting paid when the bond matures. Even so, the yield function provides a good first look at a bond's potential value. So the next function for which I am talking about is the yield disk function, and this function is used for calculating yield for a discounted security. When you are offered the opportunity to invest in a discounted security, you might know everything about the investment except for its annual yield. If so, you can find that yield by using the yield disk function. To use that function and to find the annual yield of an investment, you need to know the following 5 things. The first is the settlement date, that is the date do you take possession of the investment. And next is the maturity date, and that is the date that the investment comes to an end. Next is the price, and that is the amount that you pay per $100 face value for the bond. Next is the redemption value, that's almost always going to be $100, but it doesn't have to be. In the next, we have the basis, and basis refers to the way that you count days in a month and in a year. And basis 0 is the North American standard and says that every month has 30 days and therefore there are 360 days in a year. Basis number 1 is the actual days, so that would be 365 days in a non-leap year, 366 days in a leap year, and then either be 28 or 29 days in February. So with that information in mind, we can calculate the annual yield of the security. So just look at the formula, the data I have. These are the data for the yield disk function. The first is the settlement date, then maturity date, then price, redemption value, and actual by 360 basis, which is number 2. So to calculate yield disk, first select the cell, type an equal sign, select the function yield disk, and pass the references for all the arguments. The first one is the settlement date, then comma, maturity date, comma, price, comma, redemption value, comma, and basis. Then write parenthesis. It looks like everything is in order in the formula. All the references are good, and so I will press enter and see what the actual end of this investment 0.052823. So finding a discount securities yield lets you compare it to other potential investments, which helps you make sound decisions. Okay, so the next function is the yield mate function, and which stands for the yield maturity, and it is used for calculating the annual yield of a security that pays interest at maturity. Okay, some bonds pay interest throughout the bond's life, while others pay interest when the bond matures. So if you receive the accumulated interest in one payment at maturity, you can use the yield-mate function to find the bond's yield. To do that, you need to know the following 6 things. The first one is the settlement date, which is the date that you take possession of the investment. Next is the maturity date, and that is the last day of the investment. In other words, the day when the principal you have invested plus any interest or other monies due will be paid to you. The next is the issue date, and that is the date that the security was first made available for sale. And then there is a rate, which is the discount rate of the investment, the rate at which you accumulate interest. Then there is a price, and price is expressed in terms of price per $100 of face value of the bond. And then finally we have basis. Basis refers to the way that you count the number of days in a month and in a year, where 0 says that every month has 30 days, and that means that there are 360 days in a year. So let's begin with the example. So here is the data. This is the settlement date, then maturity date and issue date, then percent, semi-annual coupon, then there is a price and basis. So to calculate yield mate or yield for the bond, select the cell, type an equal sign, select the function yield mate, and pass the references for all the cells for all the arguments. First one is the settlement date, then comma, maturity date, comma, issue date, comma, rate, comma, price, comma, basis. When I do, the yield to maturity for the investment is 6.10%. The yield to maturity represents the total increase of the investment's value expressed as an annual interest rate. And also note one more thing, that when you pass the arguments for all the dates, the date must be in the Excel format, otherwise it will cause an error. And also you can use date function if you want to pass dates in a right format. Thanks for watching.